Liberation Square after Friday prayers, wanting the military leaders to appoint a new cabinet and lift the decades-old emergency rule. More from AlJazeera now.
Cairo's most famous square, once again filled with thousands of Egyptians. A month to the day since the tidal wave of protests swept President Hosni Mubarak from power, the calls for change have yet to die down. Officially, the gathering was to celebrate the success of the revolution. This amateur video showed street vendors and a generally calm atmosphere. But activists used it as an opportunity to maintain pressure on military rulers over promised reforms.
We're asking for the rest of the demands to be met, which is dismantle the state security invasion to Jihad Shafiq resign and to say no to the emergency law. Also to protect our right of demonstrations, our right to be in the streets.
They also called for Mubarak to be put on trial and the release of political prisoners. It was a clear reminder of the discontent sweeping through the Middle East. So many leaders now facing the wrath of their citizens. Azhar Sukri, AlJazeera.
And now this from Anita McNaught, who was among the crowds there at Tahrir Square, Liberation Square, which was, of course, the heart of Egypt's 18 days of protest.
In Tahrir Square, an atmosphere at once festive and deeply serious. You can buy mementos here of some of the people who've given their lives in the Egyptian struggle for freedom. What the crowd have been telling us is they have a number of concerns, and that's why they're here again today, marking the gains they've made, but they don't feel they're enough and they don't feel they're sufficiently resilient. The changes to the cabinet, they feel, are cosmetic, and they're also concerned, very concerned, that if the impetus for reform, if the impetus of this revolution is in any way lost, there will be a backlash against the people. They will be punished for the actions they've taken. I have with me two people that we met in the crowd. Can I ask both of you why you have come here today?
We have something to say about it. We don't want to leave Hosni Mubarak only to leave, but we need all the government leave.
And you, why have you come today? What are you concerned about?
We say the same situation. We come in here to change all government. We need the new Egypt for all these young people, for everything to be new in this country. And our revolution is not yet finished. We are started and we still now stay every day till the army change for us this government. And I hope so to come in as soon quickly.
And now Yemen in some more depth. Hundreds of thousands of pro- and anti-government activists staging rival rallies in Sana'a. Thousands have also been marching against President Ali Abdullah Saleh in towns and cities right across the country. Earlier, he did order the formation of a committee to open talks with protesters, demanding he step down. From Sana'a, the capital, Hashim Al-Barra with more.
It was a show of force by both sides of Yemen's growing political divide. President Saleh's supporters turned out for their biggest rally so far. And according to a spokesperson, the president was ready for talks.
The President Saleh has ordered and instructed his police forces to step up the security and full protection of the protesters and demonstrations. But the government view that the dialogue is the key to a better future for the people of Yemen.
But it wasn't the message those calling for reform wanted to hear. Outside Sana'a University, one demonstrator explained.
And we are now passing the message to our president and to the world and to all Yemeni everywhere that we are requesting the change, the whole change. This president and his family, they have to leave, they have to give the right to the people.
The beleaguered president is relying on his supporters who live outside the capital, his security forces and his ruling party to counter the growing demands for his resignation. He's already promised he'll stand down in 2 years, but not until then. With both sides holding out, a sense of anxiety pervades the country. The capital, Sana'a, holds the key to President Saleh's survival. That's why he's so desperate to show the world such large demonstrations of support. But that's unlikely to change many minds here at such a critical moment in Yemen and beyond. Hashim Al-Barra, AlJazeera, Sana'a.
Just want to explore another side to the Libyan story. The diplomats at Libyan embassies and missions across the world who've just been deserting Colonel Gaddafi. We're going to take a look at where he's lost his support so far, starting in the east, moving to the west. Australia, first of all. The cultural councillor said the embassy now represents the Libyan people. Indonesia, the ambassador simply resigned. Malaysia, the embassy there called the crackdown on protesters, quote, barbaric. In Beijing, a diplomat resigned during an interview with AlJazeera. The entire embassy staff in India renounced ties with Gaddafi. Bangladesh, the ambassador resigned. Same happened in Jordan too. Staff at the consulate in Alexandria joined protesters. And then in Austria, Switzerland and France, diplomats have all disavowed Colonel Gaddafi. And then Libya's ambassador to the United States says he no longer represents Gaddafi either. And most of Libya's diplomats at the UN have called for Gaddafi's overthrow. So it's right across the world that he is losing support. Well, that latest resignation happened earlier on Friday. We're going to go to Stephen Cole in London for more on that and other European reactions. Stephen.
Yes, another resignation. Kamal, the United Nations Human Rights Council was gathering to meet in Geneva. Members were getting ready to punish Libya when Tripoli's representative to the council decided to make his own statement.
We in the Libyan mission have categorically decided to serve as representatives of the Libyan people and their free will. We only represent the Libyan people. We will serve as their representatives in this august body and in other international forums.
Well, Nick Spicer joins me now live from Geneva. Nick, what was the reaction to that speech?
Well, as you can well imagine, Stephen, there was surprise. Earlier in the day, the Libyan seat was empty, and the expectation was they wouldn't turn up to hear themselves castigated by the 46 other members of the Human Rights Council. And when the diplomat stood up and read the statement we just heard, there was applause. People couldn't believe their ears. It had been preceded by a reading from the Quran, which explained why people have the right to stand up to their rulers. So there was a lot of emotion on a spiritual level, on a political level as well, that these diplomats should stand away from their government and at the same time stand with their people, and particularly from the High Commissioner for Human Rights, who was very outspoken in condemning Libya earlier in the day. She spoke with AlJazeera after the event of the diplomats speaking out, and this is what she had to say.
Just stepped out of the session of the Human Rights Council, where a historic resolution was adopted without a vote. That means unanimously. The resolution condemns the violence, asks for a cessation, sets up an investigation committee, a commission, and directs me to assist with that, and has referred the matter to the UN General Assembly under a provision where the UN General Assembly can suspend a member who is grossly violating international humanitarian and human rights law.
Well, that was the dramatic bit, Nick, but what was actually concluded there?
Well, the big decision really was not to suspend Libya from this council, which it was a decision that was referred to the General Assembly in New York, but really to set up an international investigative body which will look into what happened in Libya. Now, if you hark back to what happened in Bosnia, when they set up the International Criminal Tribunal there, there were people who were looking into crimes and so on. That is sort of like what might be happening now. They've designated a group of people who will be looking into possible crimes in Libya. The High Representative for Human Rights that I was referring to earlier said there had possibly been crimes against humanity taking place. So this is all the legal groundwork that will be needed for future prosecutions. And the hope here in Geneva is that this will dissuade the people who are undertaking these crimes to stop and to think about possible punishment for themselves in the future. If nothing else, will stop their actions.
All right, Nick, we'll leave it there. Nick Spicer in Geneva, thank you. From Geneva to Brussels, where the leading figures in NATO have gathered to talk about how the organisation should respond to the uprising in Libya. But Both the Italians and the British have raised the possibility of deploying special forces in order to rescue their citizens. Let's go to Tim Friend, who's in the Belgian capital, Brussels. Tim, the verdict at that meeting, what was it?
Well, they finished their emergency meeting not long ago. They've come out with a very brief statement. Essentially, they are saying they will continue to monitor the situation in coordination with other international organisations, and will continue to consult in order to be prepared for any eventuality. Now, superficially, a very bland statement, but I think it reflects the realities that they're having to deal with here. Events in Libya are moving extremely quickly, and a lot of what NATO itself is capable of in terms of providing troops or equipment would have to be sanctioned by the UN, which is meeting later. Certainly any idea of an air no-fly zone over Libya to prevent Colonel Gaddafi firing, for instance, on his own civilian population would need to be given the go-ahead by the UN. And any idea of a ground force, even in a humanitarian sense, would have to be given the go-ahead. So they're looking, when they say other international organisations, they obviously include the UN. And there, I think, this idea of sanctions, another route for the international community, is beginning to come together. In fact, the British Prime Minister, David Cameron, had some of his strongest words yet to say on that matter.
The message is very clear, which is the violence we have seen is appalling and unacceptable. And I have this very clear message for people in that regime, this warning for people in that regime, which is the world is watching you and the world will hold you to account. And Britain, through the United Nations, is pressing for asset seizures, for travel bans, for sanctions, for all of the things that we can do to hold those people to account, including investigating for potential crimes against humanity or war crimes or crimes against the people. And people working for this regime should remember that international justice has a long reach and a long memory, and they will be held to account for what they do.
Well, that was David Cameron and Tim Friend in Brussels. Thank you for joining us. As the unrest in Libya escalates, European countries are working to get their people out. Hundreds of people have left so far, describing some of what took place on the ground. Cal Perry reports from Malta.
Finally able to leave Libya on the British frigate HMS Cumberland, not at war on this day, rather taking on the role of a ferry, getting people out of a country that's clearly falling apart.